Welcome, welcome. Let's see. Okay. All right, let's get started. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Jalissa Jones with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I'll be the moderator and technical support for today's webinar. Today's topic is Respect is Earned, Building a Trust Relationship in the Workplace. As a reminder, all participants in the webinar do not have the ability to unmute yourselves. If you have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post them in the chat box or Q&A, and we will address them throughout and at the end of the webinar when we pause for Q&A. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded. The presentation, recording, and any materials presented during today's meeting will be available on the Illinois Workforce Academy website within 48 hours of today's session. I will put a link to the presentation for today in the chat momentarily. And to be as accessible as possible, this webinar will be offering closed captioning, live transcription, so feel free to use this using your Zoom toolbar. Excuse me. Tomorrow, each attendee will receive a follow-up email, which will include a survey asking you about today's webinar. Please provide feedback and any suggestions you have to help us improve upcoming professional development efforts. And before I turn it over, I do have a couple of polls that I would appreciate for you to answer. Okay. Got a lot of Title I people. That's Chicago, Northern Illinois, other wheels. A lot of Title Is. Okay. Majority of people have answered. Thank you so much. Seems like we both have mainly Title I and people from Chicago today. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. And with that, I will hand it over to today's speaker, Antonio Gomez.
Hello, sorry, my little unmute button went away when I was sharing my screen. It always happens. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to have you. I'm excited to have this presentation today specifically. This is something that I've been doing a little bit of reading on and was very, very helpful to me in my personal life and in my professional life. So I'm hoping to be able to give a little bit of what I've been reading to you. So my name is Antonio Gomez. I'm a workforce innovation coordinator with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. We are a professional development center based out of Illinois State University. I'm sure you've seen us quite a lot. You've probably seen me quite a lot on these Workforce Wednesday webinars, but we're the ones who frequently put these on. We're also doing a lot of the events for WIOA events, and we are very, very happy to have you. So you get to hear from me today and not another speaker. Today, I've broken up the presentation into 6 different parts. So the first one is the webinar scope, because I want to give you an idea of what you'll be able to walk away from this webinar and sort of check some expectations about what you won't be able to walk away with the webinar, because I don't want anybody walking away from this webinar thinking that they have concrete, like, I'm going to do this in this situation. What I'm focusing on is I want to make sure that you have a worldview, that you have an idea of how to approach situations so that you can adapt to whatever situation you're going. Because, as you probably could have guessed, people are really different. People need very different things. People think different things of us, and you have to adapt to the moment and then make your own decisions there. So we'll go through webinar scope. I'll go through a little bit of background of what TBRI is, limitations of TBRI, trust in the workplace in general. This is going to be the longest section. That's the one where we go into TBRI techniques and how this plays out in relationships. And then I've got a couple of resources for you. So sections 1 through 4 are pretty short. Section 5 is a little longer. And then section 6 is really, really short as well. All right. So Before we get started, and I can unmute you if you raise your hand, or you can put this in the chat either way. I want to get a sense for the room. And I like hearing other people's experiences, especially when we're talking about things that are interpersonal relationships. But think of someone that you respect, or especially if somebody that you didn't respect in the beginning and then earned your respect. How did they earn your respect? You can either come off mute or you can drop it in the chat. Either way is fine with me. Being honest. I see someone raise their hand. Natasha, I'm going to unmute you. The way they spoke, loyalty. Natasha, if you want to go ahead and speak.
Hi, I'm Natisha.
Natasha, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you. For me, it's the way that this individual engaged with people, the way they spoke to them, treated them, and then the way that they carried themselves. So they followed through with what they said, but they showed a genuine interest in just individuals and overall, like their overall well-being. Thank you.
Mm. Yeah, subject matter expert, really know their stuff, and also really care about individuals, right? That sounds like what I'm hearing.
Yes, for me.
Great.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
I'm going to mute you. And I'm going to look at the chat. We've got quite a bit of activity in the chat. I really appreciate your guys' involvement. It becomes a lot more fun when this becomes interactive. So I'm seeing a lot of being honest, keeping their word and following through promises, loyalty, person who's eloquently expressing themselves. That takes a lot of self-knowledge and self-acceptance. They gave me respect, and so I gave it back. I think that is key. The way they spoke, following through on their promises, consistent, honest behavior, being honest, consistent transparency, open communication, keeping their word, knowledge of the subjects. I think we're seeing a lot of similar trends here, right? Personality, kind, respectful, being truthful, transparency, being honest. Absolutely. I agree. I completely agree. And that's the thing that I love about these sorts of subjects is that people bring their own expertise to the table. And you have a good amount of knowledge in this. And if you've been, especially in the work world for a bit, you've got your own experiences. You've had people who situations where you didn't feel like you could push back, situations where you pushed back and it went wrong, situations in which somebody pushed back on something and they didn't have a good relationship with you and it just like didn't land the right way. And you've seen it takes a lot of people to go through a workplace. Honesty, integrity, yes, absolutely. Who they are behind your back as well. So you bring your own experiences to the table. That's really the first thing that I wanted to say in this webinar. I really appreciate your involvement, and I will keep having sections for you guys to talk because I want to hear your opinions as well. So, who am I? First off, let's be clear. I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed in TBRI. Today, I'm going to be your teacher. So, what this is a sort of 1 hour overview of the concept of TBRI. I'm not here as your therapist. Please don't take any of the advice that I give as far as your own personal life. That is really something that a professional should be taking care of. What I do have is a bit of knowledge from reading a couple of books and knowledge that I really want to share because it's been really, really transformational in my own life. What you won't walk away is the ability to call away with is the ability to call yourself a TBRI expert. So I want to be very, very clear on that. You cannot walk away from this and be like, I'm licensed in TBRI. It is a whole thing. We'll get into it, but I just want to be very, very clear about. But what you will walk away with is a tool in your toolbox. The importance of trust, how important it is to build trust in the beginning so that when you do have to enforce boundaries, they're taken well and you still have a good relationship with the person. The importance of changing your mind about people's behavior a little bit and understanding where they come from, and an approach to push back while maintaining a trusting relationship. In some cases, it's not always going to work. Sometimes it's not the time, it's not the place, but a tool in your toolbox, one thing that you can use. This is not the tool to use in every scenario, but it's something that you can use in some scenarios that I found very, very helpful. I'm also going to give you a basic understanding of what TBRI is, and I know that I've used the acronym and I haven't explained what it is. I do have a plan for that. Its basic tenets and its strengths and limitations. So I want to be balanced in this too and let you know when this works, when it doesn't really work, what articles have said coming out of this in terms of trying to implement it in general. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about background of TBRI. So I've said TBRI a lot. You don't have to remember what that means after this. Really, what I want you, I use a lot of acronyms. I'll use a lot of like things, mnemonic devices and stuff like that. Really, you don't feel the need to commit this to memory. I really just want you to absorb the content and the feeling of it. Okay. But TBRI means trust-based relational intervention. And what that means is that no correction will stick where there isn't a foundation of trust. That's the primary tenet of TBRI. It's a trauma-based and evidence-based and trademarked, which is also why I want you not to walk away from this being like, I'm a TBRI expert. This is very much something that people have to get licensed in. I'm just giving you an overview of what this is and some basic tenets so that you can move on with your life and have a little bit more skills emotionally. But it is trauma informed. It is very much based in being able to respond to people's trauma. And is developed by Dr. Karen Purvis and Dr. David Cross at the Karen Purvis Institute for Child Development at Texas Christian University. I've also got my sources cited in all of these. If you ever want to do a little bit of reading, these slides will be available on the Illinois Workforce Academy afterwards. So you're free to peruse these and kind of look through the information if you want a little bit more to go off of. It is primarily to help parents of children with complex trauma. So you will find that even with these resources, a lot of them aren't a one-to-one correlation to workforce. A lot of them talk about adoptive children. Uh, this was a TBRI was made for parents of adopted children, parents whose kids have pretty extensive, pretty fundamental trauma at a very early point in their age and even in utero. There have been many studies talking about how that affects, like even in utero trauma, affects child development. And they found, this was in the mid 2000s, that the way that you approach children who have had severe fundamental trauma has to be different than the way that normally people would parent. This was kind of the advent of gentle parenting and all that, which I think is kind of on its way out as a technique that you can use, but not like the end all be all of how to be a parent, gentle parenting. But that's very much where in history we land with this, just so you know contextually. So why am I talking to you about something and giving you a bunch of resources about being an adoptive parent? Um, because adults have needs too. Adults need to feel safe. They need to feel like they have agency um, in their work and in their lives. And adults need grace. Adults need to be able to be imperfect and for that not to destroy their lives, depending on whatever it was that they did. Because sometimes, things can be felonies and then it's really out of our control. But adults have trauma. Frequently, as you get older, you get more and more trauma accumulated. So a lot of the things that we find about adoptive children are pretty pertinent to adults. Adults also grow and regress. Adults change. There are definitely certain points at child development that are key to your development, and there are areas in which there are periods in your life in which people tend to be a little bit more, I believe it was ages 1 to 2, and then 8 to 9, and then 12 to 13, if I remember, were the first three big moments of a lot of shifts. But that's a whole research rabbit hole. I'm not getting into that. What I really want you to come out of this with is to think
Hey,
of yourself as a
Antonio,
flexible. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. You kind of like cut out for a second if you like want to restart that sentence.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, the important thing that I want you to get out of this is that adults can change, that you're not a lost cause, that you're not set in your ways. No matter how old you are, you do have the capacity to change and you do have the capacity to grow and to heal. And people have the capacity to heal some of their trauma. Sometimes it requires outside intervention, but this is something, don't think of yourself as a lost cause. That's really the important part. Adults also have to push back in the workplace without being a tyrant. Regardless of if you're in a leadership position or if you're not in a leadership position, we all have to enforce boundaries. We all have a job to do. And sometimes that involves saying no, that involves pushing back on things and saying that's not logistically possible, that sort of situation. And it's important to build a foundation of trust in order to be able to push back without being a tyrant in the way that you're doing that. So TBRI has three basic phases: empower, connect, and correct. We're going to go through all three of those in the trust in the workplace section. So I'm just going to have this slide here now, but we're going to touch back on that later. I'm not going to belabor it. And I also do want to say, I've been talking a lot about in terms of the pushing back. That's a thing that we tend to associate with leadership and supervisory roles. And I wanted to ask the question, but I'm not a leader. Why do I have to know any of this? First of all, leadership skills are for everyone. Everybody needs to learn how to be a little bit of a leader. And it takes a whole pack to kind of take responsibility for their piece in order to be able to move any sort of project forward. So, uh, leadership skills are for everyone. Everyone's going to have to push back on something at some point in their life. Everyone wants respect. Everybody wants to be respected. And the title of this presentation said, respect is earned. Respect is something that you don't get right off the bat when you first get hired. Everyone is also responsible for the workplace environment. So, the important thing to think about here is to know your place. Know what you actually do have agency over. Know when it's not might not be the time, or it feels like it's not the right time to bring something up. That's totally valid as well. In any sort of conflict resolution training, I think that's an important thing to emphasize, is that sometimes it's not the right time and sometimes you're not the right person, and that's totally fine. So know your place, know what you can push back on, what's your responsibility, what's not your responsibility, that kind of situation. And take responsibility. Take responsibility for anything that you know that you do have control over emotionally. And you can't really control how other people react to stuff. What you can do is you can do your best to deliver your message in a way that's going to come across well. And then it's out of your control. So take responsibility for what you can, and what you can't, you just have to let go. Free yourself of having to deal with stuff that you can't change. All right, some limitations of TBRI. As you can imagine, building a trust relationship with people takes time. I'm going to ask a question right now in the chat. How long do you feel like it takes you to trust a new person? A week or so? At least 2 years? I would say probably I'm on the 2 year mark. Months, months, months. I usually lead with trust. That's really good. I wish I could do that. Um, about a month, depends on how long it takes to develop a relationship. That is very true. It really just kind of depends on the person too. There are some people that they speak your language and emotionally, and you just get it. Depends on how much time I spend with them, probably half a year. Completely agree. Great. Thank you so much for responding to that. I appreciate it. So it's time consuming. TBRI is very time consuming. Coworkers depends on how close, depends on the person. Yep. Need for continuity. This sort of approach requires a lot of touch points with people. It needs consistency. It requires for you to act in a similar way over a long period of time. It also just takes personal and professional capacity. It takes a lot of emotional labor. Um, and it requires a pretty high level of emotional maturity. In order to push back with any of these things, eventually we're going to talk about the ideal method of correction, IDEAL, IDEAL. Um, we'll get into that towards the end of the presentation. But all of that requires you to have very good control of how you come across to people. It requires you to be very, very aware of your tone. It requires you to have processed your emotions very, very well. And typically, any sort of confrontation comes with a bit of flustering. So you have to be really, really calm when you're flustered. And that takes a lot of emotional practice. So this is not going to be the sort of technique that you use with a one-time occurrence, somebody that you don't really know. This is meant for people that you have a lot of time with. This is for coworkers that you sit in a cubicle with 8 hours every day. You're in meetings with a lot of time. Even on hybrid schedules, we'll have meetings with our coworkers a lot. It takes a lot of time. So just saying, this is not the approach for every situation. It's been very, very effective in very, very long-term, high-touch relationships. All right, let's also talk about your limitations. And this section's pretty short. I mostly am just going to ask a bunch of questions that I want you to think about to yourself. You don't need to put these ones in the chat. This feels a little personal, and this is a recorded session, so I don't want to put anybody on blast. But how do you recognize nurturing, or do you recognize nurturing when it's happening? Are you comfortable giving emotional support? How comfortable are you asking others for help? How often do people feel safe around other people at work, in your environment? Do you comfort yourself in order to comfort? Do you comfort others in order to comfort yourself? Like, do you require other people feeling good in order for you to feel good? Does your own childhood weigh heavily on your heart and mind? Are there ways you are sacrificed in your care of others because you don't believe in your own preciousness? Are you comfortable with emotionally intimate relationships? Are you comfortable with physical affection from friends and family? Like with coworkers, you gotta think like HR. That doesn't always apply, but just a gauge. Are you comfortable cradling your child in your arms for sustained periods of time? This is this is taken from The Connected Child, which is a book by Dr. Karen Purvis, who was the originator of um, TBRI. So you will see that a lot of these quotes have to do with childhood. But again, this is about how available are you emotionally for your child? How available are you emotionally for this relationship that you're going to be in? So sometimes you have to translate a little bit of what these quotes say to a workplace situation. So bear that in mind as we're going through this. Another thing that I wanted to point out that I thought was a really good quote from The Connected Child, which is by Karen Purvis again, um, that felt like a little bit of a jab in the heart to me was often people who are uncomfortable with feelings choose a career that focuses on intellectual achievement or one that is heavily rule based. However, the habit of suppressing your emotions can also make it harder for them to understand and connect with other people, particularly struggling children who are haunted by their past and limited by neurological impairments. So we all mostly work for the state, we work in workforce, we work in these kind of situations that are pretty intellectual and not without their emotional component. But I do feel like this might, and I could be wrong, I could be very wrong, but this feels like the crowd that might have maybe thrown themselves into a heavily rule-based or intellectual field to be able to avoid emotions. So that's something to be able to think about. It's something to be aware of. I can't really give you the solution for that. That's really something of your own journey, but it is as you're walking into building a trust relationship, you need to be very, very aware of your own emotional capacity. And I tell you that I reading the last questionnaires that I've gone through, I feel very personally attacked by a lot of those because I don't really think that I'm the friend that I want people to call in a crisis frequently. And sometimes I wish that I weren't, sometimes I wish that I weren't. But we all have a certain spectrum. So invest in your own well-being just for your own growth and to grow yourself in emotional maturity and to be able to absorb things that normally would have really, really upset you and just deal with them, process them, and move along in your life. Free yourself from perfectionism. That's really, really important with this. Uh, a big tenet of TBRI is to react to that when we get to the correction stage, to react to things pretty quickly. Like when the whatever undesired action is happening, um, you need to react within like 3 seconds, which we'll get into later. And that doesn't really allow you a lot of time to think. So you have to forgive yourself for not being perfect. You will probably never have a perfect interaction in your whole life. And especially in these sorts of situations, it's a matter of like the bigger picture rather than the individual mistakes that you made along the way. So be forgiving of other people, but also be forgiving of yourself throughout this. You'll probably think about the conversation that happened afterwards and be like, I wish I'd done something differently. And that's for you to change next time. But you have to free yourself from perfectionism, or perfectionism is going to keep you frozen from being able to do something actually good. So don't let perfect get in the way of good. Something that I've heard a lot from my dancer husband. Um, Unfreeze your feelings. It's really, really easy to get detached from your feelings. And we are emotional beings. In order to have a trust-based relationship within the workplace, you need to allow yourself to feel a little bit. I'm not saying throw yourself into emotional labor and do unnecessary emotional labor and touchy feeling and all that kind of stuff. It depends on the environment, depends on the people that you're working with, but you do need to be in touch with how you're feeling, or you're going to react out of emotion and not be aware that you're reacting out of emotion and be able to check it in the moment. Okay, I've talked a lot. Before we actually get to this slide, I'm going to black out my screen and any questions as we get started. I've talked a lot about the foundations of TBRI and what it is, what its limitations are. Any questions before we get started on this trust in the workplace and getting into a little bit more structured techniques? Feel free to use the Q&A, drop it in the chat, raise your hand. Up to you. All right. Hearing none. Okay. There are three basic steps to TBRI. The first one is empower. The second one is connect. And the third one is correct. So we're going to start with empower. For people who've experienced trauma, because this is a trauma-based practice, control equals survival. So frequently people who have had things happen to them that they had no control over feel a sense of needing to have control of as much as they can in their life. That's a very fundamental thing to think about when you're talking to adults. So, some things that you can do to sort of set the stage. A lot of these have to do with leadership, but also, I mean, all of us are setting Zoom meetings. All of us are in some sort of capacity in charge of building agendas, that kind of situation. So, within your control, set clear expectations. In the end, we're in a workplace. This isn't all about being touchy feelies. This isn't all about let's get to know each other in every sort of like intimate detail of people's mental health. We don't need to do all of that, but we have a job to do. So sometimes we won't be able to predict what happens. You can't protect everybody from everything. As I said, free yourself from perfectionism. Things are going to happen. Um, but be clear of what you expect of people. If in trying to be polite, you're letting someone dig their own grave, you're breaking their trust a little bit. If you see something that is, especially in a supervisory role, starting to really, really affect someone and you don't say anything in the moment, then you're just kind of letting somebody dig their own grave and make things worse for themselves. And in the moment, that might feel like I'm trying to keep the peace, but in the long run, you're breaking their trust by not bringing up something that you should have, especially if they asked you for feedback and you were like, I don't know, cowardly is a strong word for that, but it's it's hard. It's hard. It takes a lot of bravery to bring something up with somebody. And it's worth having a little bit of bravery in that. So if you see someone that's digging their own grave, don't break their trust by not saying anything. Of course, take their emotions into consideration, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to say that caveat every single time, but I do want you to balance with everything. Control equals survival. So think about how you can compromise. Give choices. Like if you're asking for something, especially as a leader, um, if you're asking for somebody to do something, give them a little bit of structured choices of what they can do. Would you like to do this now? Would you like to do it after coffee? I need your advice. Do you like Atmos or Calibri? Do you like Century Gothic? Our office loves Century Gothic. Give people micro choices in as much as you can. So the more that they feel like they have agency, the more that you can structure and allowing them to make little choices, the more they're going to feel like they have agency over their life. It also bears to say that, for example, the would you like to do this now or would you like to do it off of coffee? You didn't actually after coffee, you didn't actually like give them a choice in any sort of way. And adults aren't dumb. Adults know that you didn't actually give them a choice. So don't expect magic out of this. People know what you're if you say, would you like to do this now or after coffee, you're saying you need to do this. So don't be patronizing either, but give choices in as much as you can and choose your battles. Some things you're just going to have to let slide. You're going to have to allow other people to make decisions about how things are made and be at peace with those things being made in a way that you wouldn't have done. You just have to take a step back and be like, is this wrong? Is this a bad way to do things? No, I'll leave it alone. They can do it however they want. So give up as much control as you can. Try not to micromanage people. Give people choices in as much as possible. That is a huge essential piece of building trust, is giving people agency as much as they can, especially in a trauma informed situation with people's trauma. Control equals survival. Give people the ability as much as you can to create the environment that they need to work. And also for yourself, give yourself the ability to create the environment that you need to work. Sometimes some of these things we don't have control over, but as much as you can, think about, like, do you prefer for it to be quiet? Do you prefer to have coworkers that you can talk about non-work conversations with your life? Or do you prefer to be somebody who sets really firm boundaries about not talking about your personal life? That's also fine. Do you like plants? Do you hate certain smells? Do you take lunch with coworkers or individually? I've been in offices that do either one. Um, it really depends on, like, what do you need in order to thrive in the workplace, and try to build that kind of workplace. I have to say, one of the things that I was really impressed with in my interview for ICSPS was that one of the questions in the interview was, what kind of work environment do you need to thrive? And I appreciated being asked that question. I don't think that I'd ever been asked that question in an interview setting before. So have a recovery mindset. Like I said before, adults are malleable. People aren't a lost cause. Nurturing experiences through trusting relationships can help heal the brain. So trauma does damage the brain, and sometimes that trauma will leave you emotionally stunted in certain ways or other ways. I'm not an expert on that, so don't ask me for clarification. But uh, nurturing experiences can help heal those parts of the brain. Problems that are formed in relationships can only be healed through relationships. So sometimes we are the key to helping people heal in another way. And that's kind of magical. The next step is to connect. Again, that is fundamental in building a trust relationship, is to take them at face value and explain yourself at face value too, and build some sort of understanding of who each person is and what your values are. A huge concept within TBRI is felt safety. Even if your workplace is safe, even if you're like up to fire code and all that kind of situation, do you feel safe? Do you feel psychologically safe? Again, you don't need to answer this in the chat because this feels a little personal and I don't want to put anybody on blast. So just think about, in your workplace, what can you do to make this a reality? So to have a workplace where people can connect, people can have a little bit of fun, people can like joke and hang around and talk about random stories and uh, I don't know, not feel judged and like be able to be funny. Uh, be respectfully sincere. Like when you don't like something, can you just say, I don't like it? And it's not taken as this like huge personal insult. It's just like, I don't like it. I'm sorry. Um, Respectfully is the key term in that for sure. But can you be respectfully sincere? Can you trust people to have your back behind your back? Can you be trusted to have other people's back behind their back when they're not in the room? Gossip is a huge thing that tears people apart, and it's so fun. And honestly, it's very difficult to stay out of, but it really, 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 really damages relationships, like in a very fundamental, almost irreversible way. It takes a long, 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 long time to build the trust once you've broken it. And this I will ask in the chat. Once somebody broke your trust, if you have managed to have someone break your trust and then regain it, how long did that take? Years. Depends who. Years. I'm always thinking about the issue. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to forget. I don't think it has yet. I feel sad about that. Yeah, yeah. Years until I see change. Yeah. hmm It depends on how they tried to repair the breach. Yeah, absolutely. I've broken people's trust and never regained it. No matter how hard I tried, I have had my trust broken and they've never regained it no matter how hard they've tried. And I've tried to be flexible. Ooh, Maya Angelou. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. She's right. It takes a long time to build trust. So this is really not to put the pressure on. And again, yeah, never regained. Yep, yep. I don't hold grudges. It sits on the back. Yeah. Absolutely. You gotta let that stuff go, but also you don't want to like we're smart. We're not gonna allow people to do the same mistake over and over and over again to us. I think that that's a smart way to be. But Maya Angelou, um, it takes a long time to do this. And so as much as I've said that free yourself from perfectionism, that doesn't mean don't go at it from the beginning with really good intent. It really, first impressions are very, very important to people. And once you break their trust, it is really, really hard to regain them. So this is something that is way, way easier done from the get-go than walked back. So sometimes it's too late. It's okay. It's okay. Like again, free yourself from perfectionism. Yeah, like Heather said, do the best you can until you know. When you know better, do better. I think that means you also have to give people a bit of grace. Completely agree. So again, from yourself going to other people and other people going to you, it's easier to start with a trust relationship than to create a trust relationship. And it's certainly easier to not have to walk anything back. So, again, do you trust people to have your back behind their back? And can other people trust you to have their back behind their back? So, can people be imperfect? That's a big one. I think in management, it is very, very important and a big green flag whenever you walk into a workplace if management is willing to admit when they've messed something up and apologize. Um, that comes from the top down, but also if you have no control over that, it comes from the bottom as well. Like you have to allow other people to be imperfect as well. So, are people allowed to be imperfect? Obviously, things that go wrong have consequences. There's nothing that we can do about that. But we're all human and we all make mistakes emotionally at work in any sort of situation. Yeah. Once regained, there were limitations. Absolutely. I really appreciate how active you guys are being in the chat. Really, this makes it a lot more fun. I feel less like I'm talking to the void. All right. So how do you build felt safety? Food is huge. Food is huge. People have needs. Adults, children, children who are adopted, children who are not adopted. Everybody needs food. And if you're hungry or you need water, you're not going to be able to concentrate in any sort of way. And food goes a really, really, really long way to build trust with people, which is why there's like the jokes of the office pizza party. Like that's food goes a long way. We all love food. Structure. I'm a rambler, if you can tell. And I've had to learn a lot how to let people know what they're going to be expecting and to stick to that. So, how long is this meeting going to last? That's very important. What will happen during this meeting and activity? What can we expect to happen? What is expected of me during this activity? What am I expected to do here? What's the goal of me being here? This is very, very important. It's important in a adoptive parent situation of like preparing kids for new activities and going out, socializing and getting them used to being around other people, especially in an adoptive family. But at work, it is vital. It is vital that people know why they're there because we're all busy. We're all very, very busy. And allowing people to feel that you are somebody who, when you bring an agenda, that is exactly what they're going to be doing goes a long way in building trust with people. Cleanliness is also huge. Clutter is very overstimulating. So having a place that is clean, that is well attended to, that doesn't have too much stuff in it, goes a long way. And that means different things to everybody. Like, for example, if you look at my cube, you can't see it right now because this is my home, but my cube has a lot of paintings and pictures and drawings and things that my friends have made beforehand. And I like having clutter on the walls. I like that maximalist look. But I hate having stuff on my desk. It makes me very, very overwhelmed. If I have stuff on my desk, it's because I'm stressed out and I've got a lot of things on my plate and I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything, but that's not my ideal situation. So clutter's overstimulating. Listen to people and what their preferences are about clutter and what makes them overstimulated, what doesn't make them overstimulated. Again, this is a time-consuming process, but we're assuming that this is with people that you see often. Learn about them. Learn a little something about them. So keep stuff clean, provide food if you can, structure. Or if you're having a conversation, it's easier to have a conversation over a cup of coffee than with no food at all. So be aware of other people's feelings. So, are you aware of what's happening in your coworkers' lives? Sometimes they might react to something because they're going through something that is just devastatingly awful. Um, how do they communicate? What's their baseline? How are they typically? Are you noticing a change in hygiene, appearance, the way that they talk, how sociable they're willing to be? Are they somebody who normally is like very reserved about information, and all of a sudden they're spilling their deepest, darkest secrets to you? All of it can be a red flag. So, with all of these things, it's really important to get to know people's baseline, which involves getting to know them and being aware of their feelings. So, talk to people, ask them questions. It's really important. Awareness of your own feelings. Do you know when you're overstimulated or burnt out? That's very important to knowing when you have the capacity to be able to have a correcting conversation or a conversation in general. Um, do you know when you're feeling shame? Do you know when you're feeling regretful about something? Do you know how that feels to you? Do you know how you react? And how do you respond to any of the above? It's good for us to know ourselves so that we know, especially when we know, say from a conversation with a coworker, that they have certain things that will set them off. If that's your reaction to shame, stress, you need to be very, very aware of that because you could be having them walk into an emotion just by the way that you're having your own emotions interact. So, building felt safety is a lot about understanding other people's emotion and understanding your own emotions as well, which is a complex issue. I don't have concrete, like, do this, don't do that. With this particular thing, it's a flexible thing that we all have to learn with time. People appreciate people who have a good memory. This is horrible. I hate this. I wish it wasn't true. But people really, really, really are deeply affected by if you remember the small talk, if you remember the real talk, especially. Um, if somebody comes to you and is having a hard time about something that they already talked to you before, it's re traumatizing to have to repeat yourself and relive the situation. So as much as you can, try to remember people's dogs, you know, try to remember what they've been through. We're not perfect. Again, people are going to forget, especially if you met them at like a conference where you met 200 people. Just do your best, but put in some effort into having a good memory. People give signs even when they're not trying to, uh, when you're communicating with them. People's pupils dilate even when they're very good at covering their emotions. And I fortunately have very, very dark eyes. So the lighting has to be really, really good for people to be able to see that. But most of the time, you can see if somebody's eyes are dilated. So that is a huge, like, approach with caution situation. Are they off their baseline? Do they seem like they're acting different than they usually do? Just like look for the signs. Try to be as aware of your surroundings as possible whenever you're having these conversations and really, really invested in that. People appreciate also when you look like you're listening. So when you're talking to people, and this is mostly for in person, square your shoulders with them. If you're sitting next to them, like say that I'm sitting here and somebody's sitting right here, turn a little bit to talk to them. Just like something, make some sort of effort to square your shoulders with them when you're talking to them. That makes a huge difference in looking like you're listening to them. Make eye contact, unless, of course, they don't want you to. This can be a cultural or different, uh, like individuals with autism might not appreciate that as well. So everything subject to the person, but be in the moment. Take a moment to not think about other stuff and to really like that's honestly the biggest part of of having a good memory is allowing yourself to completely disappear to the world and be totally engulfed in the conversation that you're having with this person. It goes a long way. And people are very smart. People are perceptive. People will see when you're mentally wandering or if you're really, really paying attention. So, in large groups, try to give individuals 30 seconds of undivided attention. Sometimes that's not, but like as much as you can, try to like give people individual attention, even if it's in short spurts. It goes a long way. In a virtual setting, try to start the conversation conversationally. So we all are on meetings. We're all there to discuss important work things, but start the conversation with whatever you're interested in. I mean, honestly, even if it's the weather, people will talk about the weather forever. The weather's always crazy. Start conversations casually. Talk about your life. Talk about, especially in a virtual setting where we're meeting a lot of people, mostly online, infrequently in person. It's difficult to set a relationship with people, but it's vital to take that extra time to the 2 minutes before you're logged on, talk about whatever, or like the first 2 minutes at the start of the meeting, talk about whatever. If they seem stressed, maybe not the time, but take the time, invest in people, be in the moment, forget the whole world except for that one person in that moment. Okay, we're nearing the end. So we've gone through empowering and connecting. We're going to go to correcting. And something that I really, really, really want to emphasize before we go on to correcting is that empowering and connecting are much more important than correcting. There's a lot that you can do without having to get to a correcting stage if you've built that empowering and connecting thing. So really, really focus on the first two and much less on the last one. I've talked a lot, and before we get to correcting, I want to make sure that nobody has any questions. Again, I'm not like a therapist or anything, so I might have to be like, I'll look into that. But any questions, any examples, any comments, anything that you feel would be pertinent, because I want to make sure that we respect everybody's lived experience in here too, and everybody brings a lot to the table. So feel free to raise your hand, put it in the Q&A, the chat, whatever you feel. All right. Hearing none, I'm going to move on. Feel free to just drop them in the chat too, and we can address them later if it took a little bit to chat. Sometimes that sounds like a paragraph question. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Correction. Again, the goal is not to get to this stage. Correction strategies are a sixth of what we do. That's from Karen Purvis. Again, I've quoted her a lot, who founded TBRI. I just want to say that I love this framework. I'm reading the comments, by the way. I just want to say that I love this framework as my background is in child psychology and my mom and parent support group and as a mom and parent support group facilitator, I often lead with connecting first and correcting second. It's a powerful tool when people and children know that you see them fully and care for them. Couldn't agree more. And thank you. I appreciate it. I found this very, very helpful in my relationships. Okay. Correcting strategies are a sixth of what we do. That's very, very foundational to TBRI. There are two types of correction. There are proactive, which is how to set the stage, which is why it's 1/6 of what you do, because you start with empower and connect. I don't know. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but it doesn't matter. You start with empower and connect, and then you move on to correct. So being proactive is vital to be able to push back on things and still have a good relationship with people, or at least one that can recover easily. Be responsive. Responsive is what you do in the moment. And we'll get into a few techniques with that. So think of this as a holistic, like the whole parts are vital to this stage, and the foundation's got to be in place for this to work well. So many TBRI resources in terms of techniques to correct behavior are very child oriented. So if you, after this, want to go down a rabbit hole and read like the Connected Child or any of the YouTube videos or anything that I've put in the resources, know that a lot of the techniques are meant for children. And so we can't really like, no, thank you. Let's try that again with respect to adults. So adapt. Don't be patronizing. All right. Shift your mindset to see misbehaviors not as a headache, but as an opportunity to teach new skills. When you see things that really grind your gears, take that as a moment to teach and not as a like slight to yourself. Even if it is a slight to yourself, take it as a moment to teach. Take it as a moment to be like, okay, we're gonna take a moment and address this because I will not be treated that way. Maybe don't say it that way, but internally that's what you're thinking. People are reacting in the best way that they know how, and trauma changes how that looks. The way that people process their emotions looks different from person to person just from the get-go, and then trauma just exaggerates that in all sorts of different directions. So try as much as you can to think the best of people, as much as you can. Like, absolutely try to assume that people are coming from a good place. For leaders, there's a really interesting chapter in The Connected Child talking about how to really be a parent in the situation and to take control of the situation. So, this quote I really loved: a little child who has always been the boss of themselves is not a happy child. Deep down, it is a relief for them to learn trust and rely on a safe adult. Now, why would I be bringing this up to a bunch of adults? Why do you think this is pertinent to what we're talking about, particularly in terms of leadership? You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat, whatever you like. Leaders create safety by creating direction. Absolutely. People want to feel a part of a team, and a team needs direction. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to take a little pause. We'll come back to the chats, but I want to show you a little video. And I'm going to out myself as a millennial, and I don't care because this is a Tina Fey and Amy Poehler video, and I love those two. So we're going to watch a little video, and then we're going to come back. And you can keep dropping stuff in the chat. No worries about that. Setting parameters creates safety. Absolutely. Yup. Uh-huh. Same. All right. Let's watch a video. And then Jalissa, you can let me know if this doesn't look right. I've got something in the way of the play button, dear.
No, you're good.
I'm gonna have to play it and then make it full screen. I apologize. I clicked the little. I'm gonna unshare my screen, and I there's a little button that has like tools to draw, and I clicked that instead of clicking play, and so now it's just wanting me to draw all over the screen, which is not what I wanted to do. All right.
Feel that way about when I'm in a situation where I don't feel like there's a strong leader. Like where I'm being directed by someone who doesn't quite know
Yeah.
what they're doing, or but there's no one telling us what to do. Like there's no one in control. I have that grouchiness where I feel like I'm either going to have to take over here, or I'm going to have to check out.
Yeah.
And I've been in a couple projects where like week one, I'm like, oh no, like we don't have a captain. Like this ship is going
Yeah.
down, and you can see months ahead.
Yep.
How do you? Yeah, I don't. How do you? You just kind of. I guess you just watch funny videos in your trailer,
Yeah. I think the one way is, you shut down.
and the other way is you try to clumsily take over and make people uncomfortable.
Yeah. Those are the only two. Those are the only two options. They really are.
But like, hold on, I'm gonna take a lip balm break.
We could stop at the lip balm break. Okay. So when there isn't clear leadership or clear direction of where to go, as much as we don't want to be a tyrant, it does create a power vacuum. And if you've studied Roman history, you know that a power vacuum tends to lead to some sort of somebody trying to take over. So I should have gotten from the current slide. I apologize. Doing great at technology. I did try to hit the space bar. I don't know why that didn't work. I also thought that I'd figured it out. All right. Am I sharing my screen? I don't think so, no.
Not
All
yet,
right.
no.
Doing great. Thanks for your patience. All right, we're back. Okay, so when there's a power vacuum, people will try to fill that vacuum. I'm going to read the comment because as a child, if your childhood was full of trauma, then you don't know how to react correctly, how to act correctly. There was no direction as a child for bringing this up is vital. There was no direction as a child for bringing this up is vital so people can understand where the foundation started. If it was rocky or misunderstood as an adult, it's hard to live life without direction. Completely agree. And also, just even if there isn't trauma, we expect leaders to lead, and it's very important for them to take leadership again, or some sort of vacuum. So this is for everybody, though, and not just for leaders. Everybody's going to have to take on some sort of leadership role at some point. Um, get into the habit of listening to the music and rhythm of your own voice so that you know when to slow it down. Discipline yourself to conserve your words as well. Um, I'm reading in the chat, how can you try to understand where people may be coming from without asking intrusive questions? I don't have the right answer for that. I think that that depends really on the person. Some people are really comfortable with being open about their lives, and some people aren't. So I would say suss out the vibe, see if there's somebody who really is okay with opening up, and if not, then no. And sometimes it's not okay to ask the question. Again, we're in a work situation, so sometimes it's not appropriate to dig into people's lives. So unfortunately, I can't really give you concrete feedback, but what I would say is follow your feelings. Try to be as aware as you can, and then make a decision. In the end, we're not going to be perfect. You might make the wrong decision. You got to be okay with that because you at least were trying to make something better. So, get into the habit of being aware of your own voice. When you're having to correct people, it is so, 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 so important that you are extremely aware of how you're coming across in your physical language and also in how your voice is talking. They also recommend moderated voice of authority. I don't know if anybody's watched Dune, where the Bene Gesserit talk into like super deep voice and command people to do things, but that's basically what TBRI is saying to do is when you need to have a serious conversation, you need to have a little bit of a modulated voice. It's not your normal tone. It's something that's either pitched down a little bit or um, slower, more conservative with your words. There's got to be some sort of change in your voice that goes from we're being silly, ha ha, to I'm being dead serious right now. So use the voice in a situation. Make sure that you're very aware of how that voice sounds. So maybe practice a little bit. I don't know, but use the parent voice a little bit, not in a patronizing way, but have a modulated voice so that people know that you're serious with your tone. And then we get into how to react in the moment. And again, with any of these sort of mnemonic devices, I'm always hesitant to show them because I never remember what I probably won't remember what the ideal approach means 45 minutes from now. But it's to help your worldview. Don't think of this as a test. This is just a teaching. So respond immediately, respond directly, respond efficiently, respond in an action-based way, and level at the behavior, not the person. So the ideal response is what you'll see this referred to as. Respond immediately. So address the behavior within 3 seconds. People learn quicker when they have a concrete example. And it is really easy. I don't know if you've been in a fight with somebody and they're like, give me one example. And you're just like, flustered and you can't think of anything. That to prevent that, you got to address things exactly in the moment because then you don't have to think of examples that happened just now. So it's easier to address things within 3 seconds. So check your emotions. Don't respond out of anger either. If it is in those 3 seconds and you realize that you're real heated, maybe wait for the next occurrence or bring it back up later. Use your judgment, but read their body language. Free yourself from perfectionism. A good metaphor that I like to think of is the duck on the pond, where they above the water look really calm and pleasant and just like floating around, and underneath they're paddling, because you got to think fast, but you got to look real calm. De-escalate the situation as much as possible. Try to Don't feed into their feelings. Try to diffuse their feelings. Try to show a lot of compassion and say, you know what, I get it. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. If they're feeling shame about being angry or how they reacted, if you feed into that shame, it's just going to make it worse. So showing forgiveness right from the get-go is a good way to de-escalate people's feelings. Because yeah, people sometimes will make themselves feel worse because they feel bad about feeling bad. So try not to pile onto that. And then use the voice again. Have some sort of modulated tone, something that is calm and comforting and slow and very direct. So don't dance around the subject. I heard on, I think, a podcast once, I don't know, that a good manager, if you're about to get fired, will say the F word at some point, not the bad one, but fired, um, before they actually get, like when you're on a corrective action plan or some sort of thing like that. It's important for you to be clear about what's at stake if things don't go right. And especially at work, people depend on their livelihoods. So if somebody's going to get fired, somebody should have said the word fired at some point before. And that is so hard. I don't know if I have the guts, to be honest. But try as much as you can. Don't catastrophize. Don't, especially if somebody's having some sort of, maybe a slight anxiety attack or something like that. It's really important to break a thought spiral and not allow things to fall down. Thank you, Pamela. I'm glad you could be here. Have a good rest of your day. And watch your tone. Being direct can be taken wrong so often. Um, but try to be direct. Try to watch your tone. I see that somebody's hand is raised. Kevin, I'm going to let you unmute.
Sorry, I did that by mistake.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. I was excited for the interaction. All right. Um, so yeah, be direct. Be efficient. Think about the economy of words. Don't talk too much. Don't repeat yourself. I mean, repeat yourself in terms of a like educational way of knowing that people aren't going to correct their behavior the first time. But when it's happening and when some behavior that you don't appreciate happened 2 seconds ago, then don't talk too much. Use very few words and talk very calmly. It's hard. It's really hard to not fall into lecture and keep going and being like, do you understand what especially if they seem like they're not understanding what you're saying. It's really hard to not keep going. And you guys just got to let them misunderstand a little bit sometimes, because sometimes people need time to digest. You got to be so concise in what you're saying and move on, so that they can see forgiveness immediately. So you're not like stuck in that horrible feeling. Um, and then action based. You can't just critique a behavior. If possible, people need to know what the correct behavior would have been in that situation. So try as much as you can to give suggestions about the correct way to act. That's difficult. It won't apply in every situation, but as much as you can, try to not be just I hate it, 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 just spam that button over and over again, and be a solutions person. Um, but yeah, give people a way out, give people a choice. Again, that helps build that foundation of trust in terms of giving people agency. When you give them the choice of making the right choice, they're being given a choice and therefore they're back in control of the situation. So again, it'll help. Brene Brown said, clear is kind. Absolutely. It's so hard to be clear. It's so hard to be honest, but it is the biggest kindness that you can do for people. And then level at the behavior. As they used to say back in my church when I was a kid, I was about to say love the sin, hate the sinner. You know, if you want to do that, you can do that too. But level at the behavior, not the person. Adapt to the person. Don't be patronizing. And really think of this as behavior and detached from who they really are, and that they are reacting in the best way that they know how in that specific moment. We're nearing the end. So before we get started, or before we finish up here, um, Sometimes it's not the right time, and sometimes you're not the right person. And sometimes you're going to miss an opportunity. Sometimes you're going to sit there and think, I really should have said something right then. And that's okay. It's not always going to be the right time. You're not always going to make the right decision. You have to free yourself from perfectionism because, again, you miss good by trying to be perfect. That's really the end. The rest of what I'm going to say is resources for you. So, any questions, comments, or examples before we move on to resources and then wrap up today? Or anything that you learned too. I'd love to hear that. I like the framework. I appreciate that. I did too. I honestly, this has been it was suggested to me by one of my sister's friends, and she's a social worker. So she sent me down a book rabbit hole, and I really couldn't be more grateful to her. All right. I'm seeing a lot of thank yous. And if there are any questions, I'll go back and address them. But I want to get through resources, and then we can have final questions and logistical stuff. So, strategies to reduce chronic fear. This is about felt safety. This was a list that's in the Connected Child that's over a couple of chapters. So I figured I would just give you a couple of highlights because I found it really helpful. Alert people to upcoming activities. Make their day. I'm so intrigued by this comment. What does I'm an SWR mean to?
Social worker.
Social worker. Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. I was trying to piece that together and I got distracted. Make their day predictable, give appropriate choices to share control, speak simply and repeat yourself, be an effective leader. Do you follow through on promises? Are you calm and patient? Are you confident? And then prevent sensory overload, don't corner people, help people meet new challenges, be approachable, introduce new people to an environment or introduce people to an environment. Let them know the rules of like who's going to be there, how to react, how people tend to react. Try to prepare people emotionally for the people that they're going to interact with, especially if it's a new situation. Don't catastrophize, honor their emotions, respect people's life story. This is all stuff that has been said previously, but a good little checklist. You'll receive this with the follow-up with the survey as well. And then if you want to read more from a childhood development lens, there are a couple YouTube videos here. I believe both of those are pretty short. No, I think the second one's a little bit longer, but there's also the book, the main book that's written by Dr. Karen Purvis. There are obviously other very good books, but that's kind of the foundational one that started this whole thing. The Connected Child, Bring Hope and Healing to Your Adopted Family. Again, you'll have to sort of translate this from adoptive children to workplace scenarios. And then if you want something that is specifically about TBRI and the workplace lens, there's a really good Empowered to Connect podcast episode that I've linked right here as well. Okay, I am going to read a couple of the comments. And then, Jules, is that what you're raising your hand?
Yeah, I
Seems
just
like
want to
it.
make sure they didn't get lost.
Great. Okay. So the first question that I saw is what would you recommend as a next step for someone who is interested in learning more? I would say that especially this video introduction to TBRI, it's about an hour, but it's Dr. Karen Purvis herself talking about this, and I think she's a very compelling speaker. Um, I would also say that in general, if you're asking more about like how to interact within your work environment to start implementing this, the easiest next step that you can do is to start every conversation personally, and to ask people questions that have them give you more information about themselves. And to then, there's a really fantastic term in a training that I went to that's called joy cultivation, which is when somebody tells you information, whatever you say next should be something that heightens their joy. Like if somebody tells you that they're about to get married, the next thing that you say shouldn't be something like, "Oh my God, that's terrible. That's so stressful." You should be like, "That's so exciting. Like, what flowers have you picked?" And then they can tell you about the flowers and cultivate that joy. So that would be my next steps personally, is to just start every conversation with some sort of joy cultivation with people. It goes a long way. It heals a lot of things. And it also just helps. We all have work to do. It makes the workday a little bit easier. Okay, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit more. I'm also interested in next resources. I can apply a lot of this of what I've read of Brene Brown and Adam Grant. I really like this context. I highly recommend The Connected Child. Again, you have to do a little bit of translation, but it really is something that was very, very, I think that's the first book that I read on this. And it was very, very eye-opening. Good material. I have a staff member that is totally unrealistic. We can't seem to communicate clearly, and she won't take responsibility for what she's trained for multiple times to do. She deflects and will not take personal responsibility. Um, I think that in this case, you can only do what you can do. I'm not going to pretend to be any sort of therapist and give, like, I don't know, concrete advice on how to curb sort of behavior, but I heard the term that the two things that you can't coach are attitude and effort. And if somebody's truly apathetic and no matter what you do, they're not going to respond, I think the best thing that you can do is protect your own sanity and just do your best, be clear in what you're expecting, be as kind as you can, but you really can only control yourself. If people really don't want to be helped, they're not going to be helped. And there's no sense in running yourself ragged over somebody else's, I don't know, issues. Okay, we're at the end. Any last questions, comments, anything, any advice for other people as well? If not, we'll give a little bit for questions and then we'll log off. So glad that you seem to like this. I found this very, very helpful. So thank you too. I really much more fun when I get to talk to people. I'm very much a people person. Presenting virtually is not as much fun when people aren't interacting with you. So thank you very much for that. Okay, Jalissa, do you want to close this out?
Of course, thank you. Thank you so much, Antonio. Okay, thank you all for attending today's webinar. A survey along with the link for the presentation materials and recording will it's in the chat, but also it'll be sent as a follow-up email as well. Thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your workday.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.